you can see, again, a editor and a terminal. So if somebody wants to let me know that that's visible, I can.
Yep, it's visible.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so looks much similar to our previous demo. We're in a new application development file system, and this already it does have you know, a liveness and a readiness check in it, but we are going to be focusing on working with the. Just close these out. And let me just make sure that, yeah, we're good. Okay. So we're going to be working with a simple JAX-RS application again. And this JAX-RS application is going to do something even more basic. It's just going to return, you know, a simple string when a particular endpoint is hit. We're going to get this string back. So I am going to operate over here in the terminal for a little while, and I'm going to make use of a project or of an open source project called, as I mentioned, Odoo. And part of this will be to take a look at my OpenShift environment, which I'm just going to drag over here. And I'm logged into my operator console in OpenShift, and I'm sitting in currently in the default project where there's no pods running. So I'm just going to slide this view in and out as we progress. But the first thing that I want to do with Odoo to start developing up in that OpenShift environment is I'm going to create a project up in OpenShift. So I'm going to do that by issuing Odoo project create, and I'm just going to call it my demo app. Now let's just call it my demo. Okay, so I'm going to issue this, and Odoo. Now I have to apologize ahead of time because there's a little bit of lag between my development laptop and my remote OpenShift environment. That's just because of my local situation, but Odoo is reporting back that we now have a new project. So if I go ahead and look in my project list, let me just refresh this, and we'll take a look at what projects are available. I should have a project called my demo. Okay, so I do have a new project. Odoo has done the interaction for me between my local laptop and my remote OpenShift environment because I'm logged in there from the command line, and it's issued the appropriate commands to create a project for me, which resulted in a new namespace. Now, I do have to just make it possible for me to do some image pulls and get around the Docker image pull rate limit. So I just have a quick script set up to just get my credentials in place so that OpenShift can make those pulls. Okay, so that's really not part of the demo, but it is required for me to actually do the pulls that are going to happen. All right, so we've got a project created, and now I'd like to get a running instance of an OpenLiberty server up in OpenShift. And if you notice over here in my application project directory, I do have this file called devfile.yaml. And what a devfile.yaml file is it's a YAML file that describes an entire development environment that Odoo will put into place in a container running in OpenShift. And it's you know, it's a development environment that that my team has developed for the Java OpenLiberty development experience, and it's essentially going to result in a container that is running OpenLiberty and running OpenJ9 Java and has a instance of Maven deployed within it. So as Odoo operates, it's taking its cues from this dev file to establish the proper environment up in the cloud in that OpenShift environment. And I'm going to do the first of that by issuing Odoo um, component, create, and I'm just going to call this component my app. So let's go ahead and run that. And we're going to see Odoo following the commands which are laid out in that dev file to establish a development environment up in the container, and as well as follow various build and run commands that will be executed on our behalf every time we make a code change. But before we can make an actual code change, once we've created a new component, we're going to issue this Odoo push command. And so what Odoo push does is take our current local development file system, and it's going to sync it up to the container file system that's running now up in our OpenShift dev mode. So if I just jump back to my OpenShift environment and take a look inside my demo. So let me just see where we're at. Okay, so I still have no container here, but once I push up there, we will see a container created for us, and it will be running OpenLiberty. So let's let Odoo push work. And again, dealing with just a bit of a lag between my local environment, but once that takes effect, we can see my app pod starting, and Odoo is then running the build and run command for my on behalf of my application. And so if we were to jump over here into the pod and take a look at the terminal and see what's happening, sorry, we'll look at the logs. You know, we see that there is some activity occurring on behalf of our application, and namely, it's a server initializing and some tests running. So we now have a connected application development environment locally on our laptop that is also now running in conjunction with Odoo up in the pod environment in our OpenShift. I'm going to slide this out of the way. And now I'm going to just let you know that part of the dev file configuration gives us an actual URL that we can use to test our application on. So our dev file laid out a configured URL, and we can see what that URL is by issuing Odoo URL list. And we're going to find that once we respond to it, that we are going to have a URL that we can then put into a browser. So if I copy this and I bring my browser back into the picture, and we hit this URL, we're going to see that we have a running application, and my microservice is running here. And I have my string being returned to me. So that's great. Now I'm off to the races in terms of that fast inner loop development cycle. So if I were to jump back here to my editor, and I wanted to start now iterating on making changes to my application, I might change this to a new string, and I'll just issue a new string here, and I'm going to save that. All right, so now nothing happened automatically when I did that in terms of Odoo. I would have to issue the Odoo push command again. All right, so if I hit Odoo push, in this instance now only that single file that I updated is going to be pushed up to our running server in the cloud. So once that responds, we're going to see that the build and run command was executed up in the container. And if I bring back my URL and I re-hit the endpoint, we're going to see that we have an automatic live updated change to our application running in a near production-like container up in OpenShift. So that's outstanding. if we then want to take a look at sort of what's happening up in the terminal on the logs and see what exactly is going on, we did change that string, and our test case, because our dev file started Liberty with the hot tests enabled, our tests are running after every update. And we now have a failure because our test case is looking for that original string, and we've changed it. So I'm going to go ahead and just change that back again so that we can have a passing test case. And if I come back here and make that change, whoa, that's not good. And change that back to Open Liberty, and I save that again. Again, an Odoo push will deliver that back to our running server. And we will see that change occur. Just give it some time to get through my lag. All right. So again, you can see that our server is responding. We now have, well, it looks like we still have a test case failure, but let's just make sure that our update took place. And if I hit this again, we should be back. So not sure what that view was that we were seeing with a failure, but I think I may have probably not specified the string exactly as it was originally. So, but we can see that we're getting that really quick iterative feedback for an inner loop experience, only now it's running in a remote cloud and giving you that remote cloud experience. So the only other thing that I would want to say about Odoo is that we do provide a functionality similar to Liberty Dev Mode, where we're sort of always watching the file system for changes. If we were to issue a command Odoo watch, I'm not going to show it in action, but by simply issuing Odoo watch, Odoo will then begin to monitor the file system, and for any code change that it detects, it will do that Odoo push for us automatically, and sync up the changes into the cloud. You see it's indicating that it's waiting for something to change in the file system, and when it spots that, it's going to make that Odoo push go live. So that's just a very, very quick, brief overview of what it's like to experience that fast interlude dev experience running now remotely in a remote active live cloud, and hopefully that builds upon what we saw with Liberty Dev Mode. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back just to my last final few slides here, and let me just end this.